I'm Ernie Thompson. 1992 was New Zealand's best year yet for outstanding air shows. Back in '79, when we began the warbird movement with just a few Harvards, we could only dream about air shows of this calibre. I'm going to show the aircraft in detail and meet the pilots that fly them. So sit back, relax, and enjoy your favourites in action. '92 sure was a great year for air shows in New Zealand, with 3 big events attracting over 200,000 people. Scenery backdrops complemented a lineup of aircraft never before on display in this country. Sonny Nelson hosted the first air show of the season to celebrate its 150th anniversary in March. The Nelson weather lived up to its reputation, attracting a good crowd who enjoyed a great flying program. Warbirds over Wanaka has achieved an international status, and the crowd of over 50,000 during Easter certainly saw why. The beautiful alpine setting complemented the best display flying New Zealand has to offer. Auckland's Air Expo 92 was an opportunity for the aviation industry to get together. Auckland International Airport is the home base of New Zealand's international carrier, Air New Zealand. The maintenance facilities were on display where this Malaysian 747-200 was undergoing servicing and painting. Aviation buffs were able to view aircraft close up that you can't normally. Some types have never appeared before. The syndicate-owned P-51D Mustang, piloted by B. Joe Rhodes, kicked off the flying at Nelson in the Tiger Bear colour scheme. The bright yellow paint job was applied for the filming of a television commercial by an advertising agency. Engine trouble prevented an appearance at Warbirds over Wanaka, but the Mustang was back in the air for Auckland's Air Expo 92 in the hands of Trevor Bland in its original 3-TAF colour scheme. I caught up with my old mate BJ after his flying display at Nelson.
Oh, it really is a magic aeroplane. The Merlin is a magnificent engine. It's a very smooth engine to ride behind. The airplane has wonderful acceleration, particularly on takeoff. We're looking at 61 inches of manifold pressure and 3,000 RPM as max takeoff power. The airplane accelerates very rapidly, and it really is a delightful airplane to handle.
Tell us a bit about your display, Brian, and the aircraft.
Well, the Mustang is a very easy airplane to display, in as much that the public, I think, like to see the aeroplane and the shape and speed, and particularly the sound of the aeroplane. So it's a relatively easy aeroplane to display because it does it, it presents itself really. But for my own display, I try and start the sequence at about 5,000 or 6,000 feet altitude and dive towards the airfield and try and achieve something close to 400 knots for the first pass, and from there pull up into a very steep series of climbing rolls which regain some altitude and then return to the field and move into the display sequence. It's necessary with a high performance aeroplane like this to make sure that you keep enough inertia on the aeroplane to be able to achieve the manoeuvres that you desire.
Tell us about the handling of the aircraft though. She's pretty sweet, I understand.
It's a beautiful aeroplane to handle. The controls are very well harmonised. It's exceedingly smooth in the rolling plane, and once the speed gets above about 300 knots, it becomes quite heavy on the elevator. So all credit to those combat pilots that flew them in World War II. I think most of it would have been a two-handed affair.
What's your landing speed and your over-the-fence speed on your final for a wheel landing?
Well, we commenced the circuit pattern at 150 knots, which is the maximum speed that we can lower the undercarriage, and from then on we achieve 135 knots around the circuit pattern and aim for 105 knots across the fence. The airplane touches down at around about 95 knots.
What other things stick out about the airplane to you? It's probably the ultimate machine you've flown.
I guess it's got to be the highlight of anyone's flying career, bar none. Since I was knee-high, I wanted to fly a fighter and never thought I'd be able to, and I was given the chance, and it's something that everybody would look forward to.
One of the major crowd pullers. This grunt machine, the Hawker Sea Fury, appeared in the big shows. Its clean lines, powerful Centaurus engine and sparkling performance delivered hot displays, with Rob Booth in the seat. Originally designed for carrier operation in 1943, it first saw action in Korea. This Baghdad Fury is from the Iraqi Air Force. I asked Rob Booth about the thrill of displaying the Sea Fury.
Yeah, it's a very exciting aeroplane to fly. It's a very, very fast aeroplane. It's probably the ultimate piston engine fighter that was ever built.
Tell us about the sort of speeds you're approaching the field at when you do this pretty good low-level run and stuff.
Oh, pretty much over 400 knots. It's sort of 420, 430, sort of. When you get up around 400 knots, you start looking at where you're going, not looking at the gauges.
And you pull up and in a loop, what sort of height do you gain?
We usually go up to about 7,000 feet in a vertical pull-up from that sort of speed, usually with a vertical roll on the way through.
What about landing? It's a bit of a handful then?
It's not really. It is very fast over the fence. You're approaching it, initial approach around about 140 knots, and over the fence at around about 120. The book says 110, but it's too slow. That's aircraft carrier stuff. But once you actually put it on the ground, it stays there. It's not difficult, and with the big 5-bladed propeller there, once you close the throttle, it stops.
The Sea Fury was never operated by the New Zealand forces, but the Royal Australian Navy did during the 50s. The powerful Centaurus radial engine is interesting. It has a unique sleeve valve system and is similar to the Hercules engine of the familiar Bristol freighter. The 18 cylinders deliver 2,480 horsepower. The Sea Fury has a max speed of 460 miles per hour and a max weight of 12,500 pounds. As well as the Royal Navy and the Australian Navy, the Sea Fury was operated by the Canadian Navy. It carried an armament of 4 20mm cannon in the wings and racks for 12 60-pound rockets or 2 1,000-pound bombs. A total of 615 were built, including 31 to Australia and 35 to Canada. The Sea Fury displayed here, rebuilt from an Iraqi Air Force version, is in Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm markings. One in this colour scheme shot down a MiG in the Korean War, is that right? You know about that?
Yeah, it's correct. It's reputed to have shot down one MiG, and there was a claim of another 2, but nobody ever substantiated that.
And there's not much further to go in piston engine aircraft, is there? You're at the ultimate here. I guess the only thing you can start doing is flying hot jets and stuff like that. So
yeah, well, I've had a go at that too. So, but I think I prefer the piston ones.
Yeah.
A little bit more challenging.
This is the oldest flying Corsair in the world and is operated by the New Zealand Fighter Pilots Museum. The Corsair was the most prolific type ever to serve with the RNZAF, with over 450 aircraft. Powered by a Pratt & Whitney double-wash 2,450 horsepower engine, it achieves a max speed of 446 miles per hour and has a service ceiling of 41,500 feet. At a max takeoff weight of 14,670 pounds, the Corsair sported 6.5 machine guns plus 2 1,000-pound bombs or 8 5-inch rockets. I talked to Corsair pilot Tom Middleton to find out what it's like flying this classic fighter. Starting this thing, is it quite easy to start? When you come out, do your pre-flight and then get in and...
Yes, it is easy, but there are fairly strong admonishments in the book published by the makers of the engine, Pratt & Whitney, about not allowing it to backfire when you're starting it. So when I was first learning at Whanupai to fly the thing, on one start-up it gave a mighty backfire with a huge bang and lots of white smoke, and it scared me half to death. And after that, it took me a long time to get the throttle into the right place again for start-ups, so I had a bit of trouble starting it for the next few hours. But
no trouble keeping it in a line when you're taking off?
No.
Straight tracker?
Yeah. No, you get the old adrenaline going a little bit, Ernie, and you must keep it straight. You just must keep it straight. So as long as you've got a bit of experience in tailwheel machines, it's not that difficult. And it's responsive. It's got a good big rudder, and with plenty of slipstream, it's not too bad.
For takeoff, what sort of manifold pressure and...
We're looking for maximum RPMs, which is 2,700, and we're not exceeding 44 inches of boost, which is equivalent to around 1,700 horsepower. It's important to preserve the engine life, and it's just not necessary to use the full 54 inches.
So you do your takeoff roll and you lift off at about what speed?
I think it eases itself off the ground about 80 knots or so, 85 knots. And I raise the tail just enough to give it a good flying attitude, let it ease itself off at that, and it comes off quite nice and cleanly, and it'll climb away at about 150 knots with the gear up.
How many feet per minute does it climb at?
Well, at that sort of power setting, it's going up at 2,500 feet a minute, but we reduced the power setting back to about 2,500 RPMs and 35 inches of boost. And if it's a long climb, just a cruise climb, 2,200 RPMs and about 35 inches of boost, and it's still climbing at a steady 1,000 to 1,500 feet a minute at 150 knots, so it gets the job done pretty well.
For your run in to do your high-speed run, what sort of speed are you hitting at them?
Aiming for a minimum of 280 knots, but today I had 300 at the beginning of the loop, and it was very bumpy. There were jolts all the way through the loop, right up, and the air didn't smooth out till I got right up to the top of it, and then bumpy again on the way down. And rather than fly it back right down to the proper display height, I ended up a little higher than I wanted to be on that loop.
Your aileron rolls, they're fairly simple, are they, to do?
Yeah, the old...
Not a lot of rudder required or anything?
Yes, quite a lot of top rudder required in the old Corsair, a good boot full of top rudder compared to just a toe full in the Spitfire. It's like the difference between English and American. The controls are quite high geared in the Corsair and very low geared in the Spitfire. In the roll, it does need quite a good input of top rudder just to keep everything lined up. I don't know what they look like today.
They look pretty good to
yeah,
me.
Thanks, that's very kind.
Yeah. Before you drop the gear, what sort of speed do you pull it back to in your power settings?
The main consideration is to keep the engine loaded at all times. So in other words, to keep the RPMs, if you've got 2,000 RPMs, you must have at least 30 inches of boost. And that's for the good of the master rod bearings inside the engine. Once we're below 150, the gear can come out, and 20 degrees of flap at 140 or so, and ease it round the base turn with the RPMs well back, not above about 1500, so that you can keep the engine loaded. And the trick is to not let it get too slow, because at very low RPMs it does take a while to get speed back again. So a bit of a delicate juggling act down final to get the speed back to 90 over the fence with the RPMs back, and be ready to push the prop up and give it a gun if it's all turning into a can of worms with sink and things like that. But we should be big enough, boys, if we're flying these machines, to land it with the engine back at low RPMs and low power setting, just in order to preserve it.
What's the thing you like most about the Corsair?
I've always loved Corsairs, right from when I was a kid. My dad flew them in the British Pacific Fleet, and he always used to tell us about Corsairs. I've got his pilot's notes in my leg pocket here, and I had an undercarriage, a minor hydraulic problem at Harrier, so I did the appropriate things to get everything sorted, and whipped the book out of my pocket to check up, and smiled at the irony of the fact that the old man did the same thing about nearly 50 years ago when he had an undercarriage problem in his Corsair. And that was amusing. But no, I love the Corsair, and I'm thrilled to be able to fly it, because it's always been a dream to even look at one.
Well, we all know about those dreams. We haven't all fulfilled
Yeah,
it.
we do.
The Spitfire is undoubtedly one of the most popular aircraft of all time. From the original design, it progressed through 24 marques. This LF-16 Spitfire is the pride and joy of the New Zealand Fighter Pilots Museum at Wanaka. Powered by a Packard Merlin, takeoff plus 6 pounds boost, liftoff at 70 knots, climb 2,500 feet, 150 knots plus 6 pounds boost, cruise 215 knots, downwind 150 knots, approach 100 and 80 to 85 over the fence. Listen to Tim Wallace. He just loves it.
Yes, I think it's a marvellous machine. I feel that you actually, when you sit inside it, it's like putting on a glove. You wear it. You actually wear a Spitfire, and you know, they've been designed around a person. Like the cowls around the engine is designed around the engine. The cockpit is designed around the pilot. It's a beautiful, beautiful machine.
I think the crowd's heart goes out to the Spitfire. It is the gem of the warbird world, isn't it?
Yes, well, I mean, I do like them all, I really do, but I mean, the Spitfire means a lot to me. You know, it's British. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of you know, there's a bit more to it than just an aeroplane.
The history of Tim's Spitfire goes back to 453 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force in 1945. The Royal Air Force used the aircraft for observation duties until an accident in the late 40s. TB-863 has appeared in the Douglas Bader and Battle of Britain movies. After several owners, Stephen Gray acquired the Spitfire and started a rebuild. Tim purchased the partly finished project, and his team achieved this magnificent result. Tell us about Wanaka. What do you got?
Well, Wanaka, really, I think that's where all the gathering of the warbirds are. I mean, all the warbirds in New Zealand go once a year, like a flock of birds, to one area. This year it's warbirds over Wanaka, and next year it'll be in the North Island. Our air show is growing and growing. It's an international aviation event now.
The major attraction at Wanaka was the appearance of this British-based Messerschmitt 109, owned and operated by the Old Flying Machine Company. It was shipped to New Zealand for a first time ever flying appearance of this type. This aircraft is a Spanish-built version powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin, rather than the Daimler-Benz engine of the original BF-109s. The Daimler-Benz version was a 12-cylinder inverted V of 1475 horsepower. The 109 had a max speed of 385 miles per hour, a service ceiling of 37,000 feet and max takeoff weight of over 7,000 pounds. Over 35,000 BF-109s were built, Armament included one 30mm cannon firing through the propeller and two 13mm machine guns above the engines firing through the propeller disc. For special roles, some were equipped with two 30mm cannons mounted beneath the wings. Spanish-built Bucons first achieved fame in the movie The Battle of Britain, where they aptly fulfilled the role of the Luftwaffe, accompanied by Spanish-built Heinkel 111s. Since then, these aircraft have represented the Luftwaffe at many air shows, the Confederate Air Force in the United States, and the Old Flying Machine Company in the UK and Europe. As well as the yellow-nosed camouflage 109, complete with wartime Luftwaffe markings, take note of the interesting control surfaces and distinctive features. The Old Flying Machine Company has the following aircraft: Spitfire, Mustang, P40 Kitty Hawk, SC-5A, F4 Phantom, T-33 Silver Star, Hawker Sea Fury, Corsair, Hawker Hunter and a Bucker Youngman.
Just do exactly what you like, no problem.
What about the cops?
Don't worry about the cops. No. This is one day you're allowed to do this.
After a real brief briefing from Tim Wallace, Ray Hanna took the controls of the 109 to do battle over Wanaka with son Mark. We see Mark here taxiing the newly rebuilt P40. The breathtaking Wanaka scenery and clear blue sky provided a stunning backdrop to this historic duel before a crowd of over 50,000 people, delighted with the dogfight sequences of two old foes, the Spitfire and the ME-109. Amazing realism was achieved in the mock battle. The Roaring Forties aerobatic team, with their Harvard aircraft, have formed the backbone of the warbird movement over the past 13 years. They've stolen the show at countless air shows, both at home and in Australia. World rated as a formation act, they are a credit to the aims of the New Zealand warbirds, who operate a wide variety of aircraft with past military links. Here's some brief warbird history from Roaring Forties solar display pilot Keith Skilling.
Warbirds was formed in 1979, 13 years ago, when the Air Force disposed of their Harvards. Some forward-thinking people decided to try and purchase some through tender, and warbirds really started from one or two Harvards, a Chipmunk, and some Tiger Moths in 1979.
It's come a long way now, hasn't it?
It's come a long way. We're up to 500 members and in the vicinity of 60 aircraft.
Tell us about safety in the warbirds. You're pretty well self-policing now, aren't you?
We're virtually self-policing. We're in a situation whereby we do most of the formation training, advanced aerobatic flying in these type of aircraft for the Air Transport Department, Ministry of Transport, and they accept our word on our training, our standards and our safety, and we run very, very stringent checks on the pilots and lots of courses and so on regarding airshow flying and safety in airshow flying, formation flying, and actually handling the big aircraft. We're very lucky we have a lot of ex-Air Force experience in display flying and so on and so forth. And we're lucky to be able to pass this on to general aviation. And so today we have several general aviation pilots who've come up through the aero clubs, flying the likes of the Mustang, the Sea Fury and the Corsair.
It's really a privilege for somebody out of general aviation to get into this, isn't it?
Well, you might think so, yes. Yeah. I guess it is. It's a privilege for anybody to fly these aircraft, I believe, whoever. But it's good, I believe, for aviation in general in New Zealand that we can take someone from an aero club and put them into a Spitfire or a Mustang or a Corsair quite safely.
No air show is complete without the professional presentation always guaranteed by the Royal New Zealand Air Force, whose skill, training and dedication was always evident throughout the '92 air show season. Look out for the Strike Master on one of its last public displays. A rare appearance in New Zealand skies at Auckland is this unique British creation that overcame vertical flight and etched its place in aviation history. This GR3 Harrier that entered service in the late 60s was transported to New Zealand in the Pacific Express Aleutian 76. I asked Royal Air Force propulsion specialist Steve Cox to explain the technicalities of the Harrier.
This is the Harrier GR3, entered service with the Air Force in 1969. Over the years, the aircraft has been updated with weapons packages and avionics packages. The GR3 is now gradually being phased out to be replaced by the GR5 and the GR7. The GR7 is the latest aircraft with forward-looking infrared. The pilot can now fly during the night, during bad weather conditions, as if he would on a bright sunny day, wearing the infrared goggles, using the forward-looking infrared devices fitted to the aircraft. It's able to fly by using 4 nozzles, which can be rotated through 98 degrees. If the nozzles are facing aft, the aircraft is used in its conventional mode. As the pilot slowly selects the hover, the nozzles will drop and the aircraft will be able to hover or take off short or vertical. The nozzles will move from a range of 0 degrees through a range to 98 degrees.
Nearly every feature of the Harrier has its own style, from the 21,500-pound Rolls-Royce Pegasus, Victored thrust turbofan engine with ducted cowling to suit, to the business-like in-flight profile. Here the ventral air brake is extended. Whilst control surfaces are reasonably conventional, the undercarriage is anything but. With its substantial nose wheel, wingtip outriggers, and centralised main wheel. The GR3 cockpit is a classic 60s mix of electromechanical instruments, grey panels and now mainly outdated avionics. However, the Harrier has the distinction of being one of the first operational aircraft to utilise head-up display. The Ferranti provides full flight primary data, navigation instructions and weapon delivery commands. Centralised below the head-up display is an optically projected moving map. The maps are stored on 35mm colour film and centred on the screen by signals from the nav equipment. Other features include an inertial navigation system and an onboard computer for free fall or retarded bombs. The pilot controls the mode of the aircraft with these 2 levers. On the left is the throttle, on the right is the vectored thrust nozzle control. The Martin Baker ejector seat achieves safe ejection at 0 altitude. I asked Steve to run through ordnance carried for this display.
Fitted at the moment are the Matra Sneb rockets. It carries 18 rockets in each can, and they can be fired singly or as ripple, which means the whole can fires as one. It can carry laser-guided bombs, conventional bombs, cluster bombs, and it will also carry chaff and flare in a self-defense role. Before it went to the Falklands, it was an unknown quantity in combat. It had been proved in all the trials that nobody knew how it would fight against conventional aircraft. It went there and proved that it was a very capable fighter. It has now doubled its role. It can be used as a fighter or a conventional air-to-ground attack aircraft, which is his primary role. Unfortunately, we didn't go to the Gulf War, but we couldn't send all of NATO's resources to one area of the world. And to cover the northern part of Europe, the Harrier force was kept in Europe.
And here's one of the Russian stars of the show. We were probably some of the first to get a movie camera inside these aircraft in the Western world. The Ilyushin IL-76, NATO named Candid, was designed in the late 60s and first flown in 1971. This aircraft, still in Aeroflot livery, is 10 years old and one of the 3 operated by Pacific Express. The empty weight of this aircraft is 62,000 kgs, payload of 40,000 kgs, max takeoff of 170,000 kgs. This massive cargo hold has twin gantry cranes with a lift capability of 5 tons. Here are the crew boarding, led by Captain Igor Gaudkov. I asked Captain Igor and Co-Alexander to run through the flight deck details for us.
Тангаж самолета. Пространственное положение.
That's the position of the plane on the level plane.
Прибор, который показывает текущий курс полета.
That's the position of the plane as opposed to the land.
И на этом же приборе показывается положение самолета относительно глиссады при заходе на посадку.
And also for landing.
Скорость, высота.
That's elevation, height.
Это мах и истинная скорость полета.
And the flight speed.
Положение стабилизатора.
That's the position of the stabilizer.
Отклонение руля высоты от нулевого значения.
And the position of the height regulator from the 0 point.
И отклонение спойлера.
And this is the spoiler degree movement.
Это лампочки, которые сигнализируют о работе двигателей и автоматики двигателя.
It's the lamps, the indicators that show the engine performance. Mostly they're used when they reach the emergency levels.
Это двигательные параметры двигателя.
These are the engine
обороты,
parameter, the revolutions on the top row,
температура,
temperature on the second row dials.
Здесь давление топлива, температура
fuel,
масла и давление масла.
Fuel and oil pressure gauges.
Расход топлива
That's the consumption
на каждый
of the fuel
двигатель.
For every engine. There are 4 engines altogether.
Запас топлива на каждый двигатель.
The reserve of fuel for every engine at the bottom dials.
Количество топлива на борту.
And that's the total of fuel on board the aircraft.
Здесь система управления топливной, вернее, панель управления топливной системой.
That's the panel from which you can control the fuel consumption of the aircraft.
Это рычаги управления двигателями.
That's engine control.
Выпуска и уборки спойлеров.
That's the spoilers.
Это ручки управления механизацией крыла.
That's controlling the mechanical movement of the wings.
Это Володь, стоп-кран.
This is to stop the actual engine.
Это автопилот.
This is autopilot.
Это к борту инженеру здесь относится только один пульт.
That's the firefighting system.
Это пульт управления навигационными системами в помощь штурману.
The rest of them are for the navigator and the support system for his use.
Ну, в основном у меня здесь все, что у капитана.
He's got everything that the captain has.
Покидание экипажа и разгерметизирование от 2 систем.
So these are the emergency exits for the crew.
От 2 систем.
2 system of hermetization for pressurizing the aircraft.
Кроме того, у второго пилота есть дублирование радиста.
He also has a duplication of radio controls.
По радиостанциям коротковолновой связи. Первая станция, вторая станция.
Of 2 shortwave stations control.
Значит, управление системами антиобледенения стекол кабин.
The de-icing of the windows.
И приемником воздушного давления, приемником управления скоростью.
And also the
ручной, мануал и
warm
автомат.
air which can be automated or done manually.
Первый двигатель, второй
First, second,
anti-ice system
anti-ice engine,
и крыльями
also
управления.
de-icing of the
Так. И большая
wings
электрическая
and
система
stabilizers.
управления пост стабилизатора и киля, электропост.
and the electrical system control for stabilizers and
Это система управления герметизацией, два прибора, регулятор давления
pressurizing the cabin for the crew
кабины экипажа и грузовой кабины.
and cargo.
Дублирование
guys.
управления самолетом на земле, как у капитана,
This is regulating the movement of the plane on the
он
ground
заграл. И управление системой навигации VOR-ILS, это при заходе на посадку.
and the navigation system when you're going for landing. If the plane has to land on the water, the co-pilot actually switches on the special switch for
System.
landing on water.
Поэтому все нижние клапана самолета закрываются, и он может плавать продолжительное время.
And the bottom part of the plane hermetically seals and they can float for quite an extending time.
Метеорадар.
Метеолокатор.
It's a meteorological locator.
This aircraft was one of the first Soviet transports to have potted engines. Power plants are 26,500 pound Soloviev D30KP turbofans. The huge wing features extensive high-lift devices, slats, triple-slotted trailing edge flaps, and spoilers for low speed and roll control. 40 tonnes of payload is carried on a span of 50.5 metres. The length of the aircraft is 46.5 metres, 14.6 metres at the highest point of the tail. The unique feature is its rough field landing gear. Note the APU neatly installed in the undercarriage fairing. The main gear has 4 single axles with 4 wheels abreast, while the nose gear also has 4 wheels abreast. The IL-76 has 2 radomes, with a standard weather radar in the nose and a military radar under the nose. Situated immediately behind the flight deck is the engineer station with electrical and engine controls. I asked the navigator Vladislav Kaurikov to explain the nav station directly under the cockpit with a magnificent view.
For that kind of task we have the precise heading system, navigation computer. It's old too, but very precise equipment. We have 2 inertial system and we have 1 Omega. That's the first. The second, for safety from sandstorm, we have meteorological radar. And because this plane was developed as military transport, we have special radar for correct position with help of observation ground and set data from radar inset into computer. Do you understand me? This equipment, I say again, permit us to fly any place and any time. It's very good equipment. This plane was developed as military for dropping parachutists. And for example, you can see this place was special equipment, optical equipment, to drop parachutists precise. More precision.
Performance of this aircraft is impressive in the class of advanced medium stall. Takeoff 2,800 feet, landing 1,500 feet, max speed Mach 0.8. Military aircraft were fitted with 2 23mm cannons and a radar-controlled man turret mounted in the tail of the aircraft.
Have a look at 12,000 feet.
The Barriev A40 Flying Boat was definitely one of the major highlights of the air show season. This type first showed up in US reconnaissance photographs, and this one here is the second prototype built in 1989. I asked Captain Gennady Kaluzny, Barriev Chief Test Pilot, about the systems inside and outside the aircraft.
Ну, переполет был совершен в 1987 году.
The first flight was created in 1987.
И было сделано переполет на единице. Это вторая машина наша.
But the first flight was in another plane. It's the second prototype of such type plane.
Основная цель создания, это, конечно, по заказу Министерства обороны было. И первые разработки были, значит, согласно их плана.
The history of this plane as follows. We received an order from the Soviet Navy some years ago and create a military version of the plane.
Но поскольку в мире началось интенсивное потепление,
but as a result of the warming in the world, in the military area,
то эту машину уже мы начали, собственно говоря, будем говорить, использовать и пытаемся использовать ее в мирных целях.
Now we develop some similar version of this plane.
Поскольку такой аналога машины в мире нет.
Moreover, nobody in the world having something like this amphibian.
Ну а что касается характеристик ее аэродинамических, то на ней установлено, значит, 126 мировых рекордов.
As for the performances, we are set up 126 world records in this plane.
Двигатели у нас стоят, в принципе, серийные. Точно такие же двигатели стоят вот здесь вот на 76.
Our plane equipped with the same engines as the Illusion 76.
Но мы используем еще два двигателя бустерных.
But our plane equipped with two boosters, two additional small engines.
При взлете с воды как можно меньше и иметь длину разбега.
Yeah. We are use them from the takeoff from water to reduce the running, especially in the rough water conditions.
По нашей классификации 1,45 м зыби мы выполнили взлет и посадку.
We are perform a landing and takeoff with with a wave 1 meter 45 centimeters on long waves.
Здесь стоит оборудование, значит, так, уже давно используемое на других сухопутных самолетах.
Yeah, we are equipped the cockpit with ordinary equipment which are used during the years in a variety types of planes.
Единственное, что вот он прибор, вот он прибор.
But we have some unusual device which is situated in the left down corner of the cockpit.
Который помогает нам, значит, ну, обеспечивает нас данными о характере волнения моря с воздуха.
This device displays the characteristic of the wave, like height, direction, and length of wave.
Behind the flight deck is the main cabin with flight engineers' comms and nav station. NATO dubbed this aircraft the Albatross. The Russians call it the Mermaid. I reckon NATO's name sums it up better, considering the graceful flight and its huge wingspan. These tyres must have raised a few eyebrows. The design concept of the Beriev A40 was to provide access to areas of Siberia and the Far East. On the water, this aircraft is a beautiful sight. Here's history repeating itself on the Auckland harbour, remembering Captain Music Sikorsky and the Empire-class flying boats preceding the silence of Tasman Empire Airways Limited. I recently noticed in Wings magazine that the Royal Air Force has shown considerable interest in these aircraft. The thing that strikes you first about Russian aircraft is the robust construction and sometimes lack of sophistication. But don't be fooled, they are innovative and turn in good performances in the roles they are designed for. I'm Ernie Thompson. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as we did making it. We'll be back again soon with more action and aviation interest for you.